All right, I think we're live. So happy Thursday, everyone, and welcome back to our live community. I really hope you're doing well, whether you're watching us now live or whether you'll be watching this video in the future. So if this is your first time here, we're an international community for no-code operators. And so that is people working in operations and leveraging no-code tools to scale up their career. So today in particular, we're going to be looking at APIs, webhook, mailhook. I know that we've been doing this in the past. Actually, we dedicated a whole series based on APIs that I called Planet of APIs, but we can never get enough of them. And actually, I invited our very expert guest speaker here, Sahil Khosla, founder at NoCode University, to dive a little bit more into this topic. And I'm going to just let him over to him explain to you why APIs are so important for no coders, no code operators to know and get used to. So without further ado, let me get Sahil into the space. Hello, Sahil. How's it going?
Hey, thanks for having me. It's going well. Just had another presentation right before this, but I'm ready to go again.
I know that you've been going back and forth with events today, and so appreciate you being here with us today. And before we get started, would you like to give us a little bit of a background on how did you even end up in the no-code space and what we're going to be talking about today? And yeah, I guess that's enough of questions for now.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll just pull up the slide as you're talking about me. Yeah, so I'm actually a software engineer by training. I have been in the industry for more than 10 years at this point. And so, yeah, obviously, my career started in software. I mean, building websites and applications since I can't even remember. I think my first website was built using Microsoft Notepad back when I was in ninth grade. So yeah, it's been a while since I've been in this space. But recently, a couple of years ago, I was working at a startup and uh, came across a tool to do an integration project. It was called Trade.io. And that was my first foray into this low code, no code space. I had heard the term before, but I kind of dismissed it just like any other software engineer would because, we think, everything's done through code. But when I did that project, I was blown away. And I thought I have to look into this more because it definitely seems like it's going to be a game changer and going to be the future. So yeah, so the rest is history. Since then, I got super excited about no code. I'm a visual person in nature, so it was a perfect combination using my software background, my visual building capabilities and interests, and then also my passion for education. So I combined it all and turned myself into an educator full time.
I love that so much. And I often say that in our community is amazing to see how many past educators have now turned into no coders, or they're sharing their expertise in teaching others, and just their goodwill of sharing their knowledge with other people in the no-code space. It's so fascinating and inspiring, as an
Yeah.
ex-teacher myself. So I love to see that
Oh,
every day, every guest that I have, literally, like the majority of people tell me that they've been either teaching or educators in the past. Is amazing.
oh
And
wow.
as I was saying in our introduction, we've been looking at APIs already, kind of for a full month. But I would like to know from you, why do you think APIs are so important to master from a no-code point of view?
Yeah, so APIs actually play a very interesting role because, and actually not just in no code space, just in on the internet and software in general. And the best example that comes to mind is that back in I think 2005, there's a very famous email that Jeff Bezos sent to the Amazon developers at that time. That I think it was sent to all the teams that if your product, whichever team you're working on, is not accessible via an API, you're done. Like basically, it was an ultimatum that everything has to be available, all the data has to be available through an API. And he obviously had that foresight, and the idea was that in future these things will have to talk to each other and connect with each other. And if you keep on waiting on the other team or the other tool to wait for to do the integration for you, it's never going to happen. So he made sure that all the teams and all the products within Amazon are accessible via APIs. And of course he was right, and Amazon is what it is today because of that. I mean, of course, other reasons as well, but one of the core reasons. So same thing applies to no code as well. We don't just work with one tool. We work with so many different tools, and these tools often have to talk to each other. Sometimes the integrations are built in, but how are these integrations built? They're built with APIs. But if the integration is not built in, then you sort of have to roll up your own sleeves and do the integration yourself. Again, how are you going to do that with an API? So these are just these connectors and these plugs that allow you to sort of transfer data from one place to another. And without that, basically you'll be sort of the tools will just be in a silo, and there won't be a lot of adoption because there's no way you can just rely on a single tool and get everything done. So yeah, APIs are critical.
100%. I couldn't agree, any more than that. I often say to the people in the community, if you really want to get serious about this, you have to learn about APIs. Yeah, I'm still learning about them myself, and so that's amazing. And I can see here you've got webhooks and mailhooks as well, which is something that I can't wait to dive in. And so today, speaking of that, we're very lucky to have what you told me is like going to be a 45 minutes masterclass on this. Is that right?
Yeah, so well, let's see how much we can get through. But the idea is to do an introduction into sort of what are webhooks and how exactly they work, sort of demystify that a little bit, and then try to implement one ourselves using Make.
Fantastic. And then at the end of our little masterclass, we have some time left for our Q&A with our audience, which, by the way, people in the audience, if you're watching us now live, send your love in the chat. I would love to see who's watching us right now. I can see Petros is here, Jared from our community, Bruno from LinkedIn. So shoot any questions you might have throughout the presentation in the chat, and I'll make sure I'll feed them to our speaker. So Sahil, without further ado, I guess we can get started so that we don't waste any good, juicy time for our knowledge.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I'll just have to take a second to close the door behind me because my dog is going crazy in the background. So just give me 1 second.
Oh, sure. No worries. I'm gonna see who's in the audience right now. Alicia is here. Hi, Alicia. Let me see if anyone else is texting from LinkedIn. I can see 20 people are watching on LinkedIn. That's amazing. If you are enjoying, or if you will enjoy this live video, make sure you do share it with your network as well. That would help us a ton. And for anyone else, if this is your first time here again, we are a free community that help no-code operators grow every day. We're based on our Discord, which I built with pride and I manage. So if you want to come and hang out with me a little bit more, here's a website. Feel free to join, send your applications, and I'll be in touch very soon. All right, welcome back, Sahil.
Awesome. So shall we get into it?
Let's do it.
All right. So let's talk about webhooks and mailhooks. So yeah, quick agenda. And hopefully we're able to get through most of this, but we'll see. Just do a time check if I'm taking a lot of time. So we'll start with demystifying webhooks, what exactly they are. Then once we sort of understand the context and understand what they are, how they work, then we'll switch over to the browser and actually create one using Make, and then we'll do the testing using a tool called Postman, which will act as our sort of the system triggering the webhook, and it'll all make sense when we get to the demo. And then finally we have Q&A. So short and sweet, but hopefully useful nonetheless. So let's demystify webhooks. And we are going to start by examining what are blogs and newsletters. And yeah, this is not a plug to promote my blog, I promise. This is just to do some comparison using an analogy. So if we talk about a communication in context of a blog, you essentially, let's say there's a blog that you really like, and what you will do then is, and let's say it's online, it's on a website. There's no communication from this blog. It's just a website that you know of and you really like, but you like to read whenever they have a new post. So what would you do in this case? You will probably bookmark the URL, or maybe you remember the URL. You will visit that URL for that blog, and then you're just going to sort of refresh. You're just going to go there every day until a new blog comes up, or you're just going to keep refreshing the browser. And then all of a sudden, one day, hopefully, there's a new post, and then you can get the contents of the post and read it. So, again, no sort of communication from the blog. They post whenever they feel like. You really like it, so you have to go there yourself and get the content. But you have no way of knowing when a new one is published. So that's what we have to do: refresh until there is a new one. So this method of getting the blog or communicating with the blog to get the new post is also kind of considered or called a pull method, or a way to pull the content, pull this data from the blog post to check if a new blog post has been published. And when you do this over and over, when you go there every day or you refresh, this method of refreshing and checking again and again is also sometimes known as polling, polling for whatever information you're after, right? And these are sometimes used interchangeably, but essentially we are pulling some data from this website, and polling is the act of sort of checking multiple times until you get what you want. So that's a blog, right? It sits out there. There's no way of knowing when a new one publishes, a new post comes out. So you have to go there and constantly check and then get it yourself. Uh, so now let's talk about, similarly, now let's talk about a newsletter, right? So newsletter is so similar to a blog, obviously, but newsletter allows you to subscribe. So you basically come across a newsletter you really like. It allows you to enter your email. So you enter your email, hit subscribe, and then you forget about it. You don't go there yourself. You don't have to refresh, just like you had to do in the example of a blog. And one day you get an email that, hey, there's a new version of the newsletter. So pretty convenient, right? Compared to a blog where you had to go yourself. And this time you just subscribe and forget. So this method of communication, where the information is coming to you, is also known as a push, or a push method. So the push in this case is to notify the reader that, hey, new version has been published. And sometimes with it, depending on the author, sometimes they send a link to the newsletter, or sometimes they actually send the content of the newsletter within the email. So both are valid options. But either way, you will get notified that, hey, there is a new version. Okay, so now let's switch back to APIs and webhooks. So we talked about two methods of communication or getting data. So one is a pull method and one is a push method. So time for audience participation. Which one between the two, A or B, do you think is the one used by webhooks? And you can type it in chat.
Yeah, type it in the chat, people. I was just reading through the comments, and I can see more people are joining us. Jim, Yakir, Dimitris, Brandy. It's amazing. And Jim is saying, I've been in NoCode since 2008, before he had a name, and sadly I let APIs get past me due to life pulling me away from the digital world. So busy with work, is tough to experiment and learn. I wish APIs were around when I put this stuff together 14 years ago. So Jim, I'm very happy you're here today, because in a very short time, you get to have such a good introduction to them, and I'm already loving it. So let's see. Did we get it right? People are saying push, push.
Yeah, that's
So is it B?
yeah, that's correct. So the webhooks.
Amazing. Well done, people.
Love it.
That's a very long applause.
Yeah, gotta celebrate the wins. Okay, yeah. So now that we know, like, there's a pull method and a push method of getting essentially data. Well, even a blog is a data, or it could be other kinds of data. But there's a way to pull the data, or there's a way where the data is pushed to you. So APIs are, generally speaking, more on the pull side, and webhooks use the push method. So to sort of solidify this example, in case of an API, let's say we are working with a weather API. Weather changes, like especially if you're in like some place like Chicago or Toronto, every 15 minutes the weather is different. You don't like it, you just wait 15 minutes. So, so you have to constantly, with an API, you have to constantly go, will it rain today? Will it rain today? Will it rain today? And maybe the answer all day is no, or maybe all of a sudden at 5:17 p.m. the answer is yes, it will rain today. All day it was saying no, but all of a sudden, yes, it could rain. So, but you have to prepare for an event. So you all day you keep checking, will it rain today? Of course, not very efficient. In case of a webhook, it's just going to tell you it's going to rain in 10 minutes. You don't have to check all day. Uh, it's just going to tell you if that particular event that you are interested in is going to take place. So again, it is just going to push the information to you. But in a case of an API, if you're using a weather API, you have to constantly pull for that information. So with that, let's define what is a webhook. So a webhook is a lightweight API. It's sort of a subset of an API, but it's a lightweight and powers one-way data sharing triggered by events. So it's mostly one-way in nature. It's just sort of sending the information to you. And webhooks together enable applications to share data. So this is going back to the question that you had earlier: why are APIs important? Because they enable applications to share data and functionality. And I really like this line: turn the web into something greater than the sum of its parts. So imagine if all the apps that we use today just were, in their own silos, and there was no way to communicate between those apps. We won't be here. Like, we won't be having this presentation right now. So definitely game-changing tech. So yeah, lightweight API, one-way data sharing triggered by events, and together they enable and turn web into something greater than the sum of its parts. So pretty interesting definition, and I think it covers all aspects of it. And then sort of combining the two things that we have talked about so far, the newsletters and webhooks. Just like we subscribe to newsletters, right? You go to the newsletter, you put in your email, you subscribe to newsletters. Apps can also subscribe, but in this case, they're not subscribing to a newsletter, they're subscribing to the events that are taking place in other applications. So it is all happening machine to machine. Just like we go subscribe to newsletters, apps, we configure it, but essentially what we're doing is we're enabling one particular app or one or more apps to subscribe to events from other apps. So to sort of put this in perspective as well, what's happening is, or sort of the technical name for this communication, where we go and subscribe to a newsletter or where we go and subscribe to events from an app, and then the app letting you know that, hey, this event just took place, is also known as pub sub. It's known as publish and subscribe. So basically what happens in this, as I've already explained, we go and subscribe, and then the thing that we subscribe to is just going to publish and let you know. So this thing as a whole is more generally known as the pub sub method of communication. And so the person publishing, so just like in the newsletter example, the author, right? Author is just going to publish whatever there is a new issue of the newsletter. But there could be many subscribers. It's not just one email that is subscribed to that newsletter. There could be many email addresses or many people who have subscribed to that newsletter. So just like that, in case of apps as well, many apps can subscribe to a particular event in a given app. For example, many apps could be subscribed to the weather app to let it know when it's going to rain. And when the app in question here on the left, the one that is publishing, it just has to publish once, and everyone who is subscribed to it will get the notification. Just like when the author publishes a new version of the newsletter, all the readers, all the subscribers get an email notification. So same thing. And just like as a reader, as an email address, you could be subscribed to multiple newsletters, right? A webhook also could be subscribed to multiple events that are taking place. So both sides are true, that when something publishes an event, when an app publishes an event, it could be sending it to many different people who are subscribed to it, and a particular person or a particular webhook could be getting information from many different publications or many different applications. So So that's sort of pops up in a nutshell. And to actually, I'll take a pause here and see if there's any questions.
Yeah, sure. People, do we have any questions right now? Feel free to drop them in the chat if you do. But so far, I feel like your presentation and your explanation is super crystal clear. I'm loving the pace. So
Okay.
let's see if any question does come up. I'll let
Okay.
you know.
Awesome. So now that we understand what webhooks allow and why they are and how they're different than APIs, let's talk about how to configure them. And this is again going to be a like a game show, like audience participation. See how many responses we can get. So, uh, so, so I have done this comparison, right? Newsletter and webhooks. So to configure them, also it makes sense that we sort of go one step at a time and see what we can sort of draw from the newsletter example in the context of a webhook. So there's a few steps involved. We'll go one at a time. I've hidden them here, and this is where you guys come in. So step one is in a newsletter case, we identify a newsletter of interest that, hey, you sort of browse through or you just stumble upon something that is of interest. So you identify that, oh, this is something I should subscribe to. So what do you think will be the corresponding case in case of a webhook? What are we identifying?
All
What
right,
are we
let's see.
identifying? Just like we identified an interesting newsletter, in case of a webhook, what are we identifying that we are interested in?
Let's see if people. Do you have some options for people?
In terms of options, are we maybe identifying a system or something within that system, an app, something that happens within that app?
Data we want to get, Leslie says. We're identifying data we want to get.
Close. So data is actually not in our data is not in our control because data means if it's going to rain true or false. We are interested in the event, the weather event. So it could be the app or it could be the
Yeah.
particular event within an app that we are interested in. Right. So again, like the
Jared
data is the
says a new app. Or
yeah
Santosh
that's
says the
close.
source, a publisher. Yep.
Yep. So yeah, obviously, an app or an app event. It depends on the context. But first step is to identify what are we even interested in. Okay, so now we have identified what we are interested in. We'll say we are interested in this particular event. Maybe a new calendar invite has been created, or maybe for example, email has been labeled in Gmail or any other email software. So those are all events now that we're talking about. So we identified that this event we are interested in. Or new subscriber, things like that, any events that are taking place within an app. So in the newsletter case, when we identify step two is to create a new email address. Well, if you don't have one, you're going to go sign up for an email address so that you can provide that email address to the newsletter. So what are we doing in case of a webhook?
Are we doing a get? I'm just taking a guess. Is it a get request?
So remember, so maybe on the newsletter side, all you did right now is created a new email address so that you have this address to put in to the newsletter subscription box. So in case of a webhook,
so we're doing a push.
No, not there yet. Not there yet. So yeah.
Not there yet. Sorry, Jared. I feel like I'm at school. I'm back at school with my friends. Like, right, what is it?
Yeah.
I'm nudging the community. What is it?
Yeah. That so it's by design, to keep everyone engaged. But yeah, so all we are doing at this step, is creating a new webhook. And remember, we're talking in the context of automation. Like webhooks go way beyond just Make and Zapier. There's a lot that goes behind the scenes. We're talking in context of Make or Zapier or similar automation tool that allows you to communicate using a webhook. So we just go and create a new webhook that we can then provide to the app. That just like we provide the email address to the newsletter, we provide this webhook, which is a URL, to the app that, hey, this is a URL. This is where you notify me whenever there's this event taking place. Just notify me here. Just like we provide the email address, we provide the URL to the webhook to that particular app. Just save it. I'm going to forget about it, and I'm just going to wait for a notification. So actually, I revealed step number 3. We go to newsletter and subscribe by providing our email address. We go to the system or the app that we are interested in getting notifications from, and we'll tell them, this is my URL, keep it, and I'm just going to wait for the notifications, which with that, I should stop talking. Step 4 is essentially we just wait. So we just wait, because remember, in a blog case, in the example of the blog, we had to go to the blog and check every day, or in case of the weather app, we had to go to the sort of the URL and check for if there's a new blog. Sorry, I got distracted by a comment there. We don't create a new email to subscribe.
Yeah,
The
to subscribe.
yeah, the assumption was you don't have an email. If you have an email, then you can just use that one. Similarly, if you have a webhook, you can just use an existing webhook. I hope that clarifies.
This was just a scenario. Yeah, of course. This is just a scenario where maybe you don't have, an email.
Yeah, exactly. Just for the example purposes. Okay, so anyway, webhook created, we went to the app, we subscribed, and now we are waiting. So in case of the newsletter, step 5 is a new issue is published. What is sort of the corresponding event in a webhook case? So what are we waiting for?
What are we waiting for? We're waiting for. I'm waiting for people to answer, but I'm just going to give my guess.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're waiting for the email to go through to the system, to be added to the database. People are saying push. Why are you saying pub? What's pub?
Well, a publish event is a pub.
People are saying push
Yeah.
or pub.
So.
Oh, there you go. To me, pub is something else in the UK.
Oh.
But
yeah, that's what we need right now. Well, yeah, exactly. So actually, the publish answer is correct. Here I mentioned new event occurred, but as soon as that event occurred, publish, that event is also published. Just like as soon as the author presses the button that, hey, this issue is now live, that along with it sends the notification. Similarly here, whenever that event is taking place, at the moment the event takes place, the moment of interest to us, it is the information that the event just took place also is published. So the pub is indeed correct. So pub next step
is always the right answer.
Yeah, pub is always the right answer. There we go. Yeah, and then I'm going to go through the next few here. So step 6. So basically, when that the event takes place, it is published. On the receiver side, in case of the email, we receive an email notification that, hey, a new issue just came in. In case of an automation workflow, it's similar. We get the notification, but that is generally tied to starting a new workflow, right? There could be other use cases of webhooks as well, but in case of Make or Zapier automation tools, it is generally tied to, it acts as a trigger for the workflows. As soon as that event happens, trigger the workflow. And that's what makes webhooks interesting, because it's instant. As soon as that event happens, the workflow is going to go. Compared to an API, if you're using a built-in integration of Zapier or Make, there's a waiting time. It polls every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever, depending on how much you pay them, depending on your configuration. You have to wait a little bit. So there's a lag. But in case of a webhook, as soon as that event happens, it is published by the system or by the app, and then it is received by your automation tool, and that is going to act as a trigger for your corresponding workflow. And then in step 7, just like you receive the email, sometimes there's a question, hey, did I ever subscribe to this? I don't remember subscribing to this. So you kind of do a similar step in webhooks as well. And this is more for security reasons. You want to make sure that it is triggered by someone you trust. You either share some kind of a secret key or a password or an IP address that you know that you're expecting the event to come from. So ideally, you would do this step and validate that, yeah, indeed, I was expecting this information to come through. And then in step 8, in the newsletter case, once you have it, it's all yours. Read it, print it, share it, whatever. Similarly, in case of a webhook, you have the data and you can do any actions that you want to do in your automation workflow. So that is the whole life cycle. And actually, step 9, I should have mentioned, I forgot while creating the slides, is after you've read it, after all the workflow actions have taken place, there's an optional step after that, which is to reply. So you can reply to the author that, hey, I love the issue, I hated the issue, whatever. Thanks for sending this. In case of workflow, also, you can reply. And that reply is basically an HTTP response to tell the system that sent the information that it was received, or you need to redirect the user to some other place. So any HTTP basically event can be a valid response to a workflow, but we won't get into that detail just yet. So uh, any questions? Does this make sense?
So I would say I do have a question myself. So how would you, so the difference between API and a webhook in plain English, what would that be?
So both are ways of exchanging data. In the API, let's talk about the person
Yeah.
who wants the data. In case of an API, the person who wants the data has to get it themselves. They have to pull it. In case of a
Yeah.
webhook, the person who wants the data is going to get it whenever the data is available. They don't have to go check for it every 5 minutes.
Okay, so you constantly, okay, so an API you have to kind of like trigger every now and then. It might change and you're not realizing that it has changed because it's not updated
Well, exactly. So, like, let's say in case
live,
of
let's
going,
say, whereas the webhook is always, yeah.
yeah. So webhook actually is just waiting. It is waiting for, so the onus, the responsibility is transferred to the app, which from where we are trying to get the data. So in an API, the responsibility is on you to pull it, but in a webhook, uh, the responsibility is on the app that is supposed to notify you whenever there's new data of interest available. So it's a change in responsibility.
Perfect. Makes sense.
That's right.
Yeah, I like
Yeah,
that.
in the API, in the API example, as Jared mentioned, it is a polling trigger. It'll check every 5 minutes or whatever you configure it to.
All right, community
Okay.
people. I feel like I'm sitting at the back of the classroom here.
No, once we do we'll get to the hands-on stuff and it'll be much easier. Okay, so won't go too much into mail hooks, and actually there seems to be some confusion around. I wasn't aware of this either. There's two types of mail hooks apparently. One is to listen on events that happened within the emails, like someone clicked on a link, or someone unsubscribed, or someone opened an image or something like that. So there's one kind of mail hooks in the context of email reading events, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about mail hooks in the context of workflow automation, in tools like Make and Zapier. So they're exactly the same. The only difference is in a webhook, the information, the communication happens over HTTP, just like we do for APIs. In mail hooks, the communication happens with simply an email. So back to Zayed's point, or Zishan's point, in step 2 for mail hooks, we actually do have to create a new email address every time. We create a new email address within Make, and we give it to the app where we are interested in receiving events from, that, hey, this is the email you email me on whenever there's a new event. And then everything else works exactly the same. In case of a webhook, the data comes just like it comes with APIs in a JSON or XML format. In case of a mail hook, it comes in HTML or plain text format as the body of the email. And then the rest is the same. In case of, and just the last step, slightly different. In case of webhooks, we read the data, we read the JSON data, we read the object, get the content from it. In case of an email, especially if it's an HTML email, you have to parse it. Even a text email, you will have to parse a little bit to identify exactly the piece of data you are particularly interested in. But don't worry about this too much yet. Let's focus on the webhooks for now. But concept is exactly the same. Okay, so shall we do a demo?
Let's do a demo. Just like you, I'm a little bit more of a visual learner, so I feel like the moment that I see it is gonna sink in a little bit better.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm focusing. Look, I'm moving closer, and I'm gonna focus on you. So people, if you're writing in the chat, I'll read in a bit. I'm focused.
I like it. Okay, so let's go. So here I am on my make dashboard in my demos folder. So I'm just going to start by creating a new scenario. And what I'm going to do is have this, I'll leave this slide open. And so because we're going one step at a time, right? So we're just gonna, so so identify an app event. So for now, this app event is going to be me hitting a button. Okay, just remember that the event is whenever I hit a button. So it's happening manually behind the scenes, but that's the event that we are interested in. Whenever Sahil hits a button, I want a webhook. Okay, so just remember that. And for this,
Okay.
I will use Postman. So now I'm going to create a new webhook. So I'm going to go back to make, and I'm in a new scenario, and I hit the plus button here and look for all the available applications. And one of the applications is going to be webhooks, and that comes up at the top. So here, and you can see I get two options, Mailhook and Webhook. But I'm interested in the webhook right now. And next to it, it says instant, which means as soon as this webhook receives data, this workflow will trigger, just like I mentioned in the slides. So I click on custom webhooks, and then you might already have an email address, right? Or you might have to create a new one. So I'm going to create a new one. So I want to create a new webhook. So click on add, and you give your webhook a name, just like you name your email address. So I'll say NCO demo live. This is the name of my webhook. And for now, I'm not going to use the advanced settings, just going to keep it simple and hit save. So as soon as I hit uh, add, it creates this URL over here. So this is the URL of my webhook. Let
Hmm.
me try to focus. This is the URL of my webhook. So I'm
Yeah,
going to
exactly.
copy.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So I'm going to copy this address because I have to now go and give it to the app to notify me on this URL whenever that event takes place. So I'm going to copy and come out of this Zoom. And remember, the event is me hitting a button, and the button is going to be hit in an app called Postman. So here, I will come here and paste the URL that I just copied from Make. And this would be happening if you are sort of integrating with an app. You would do this in that particular app. But for us, the app is just going to be Postman for now. And everything else in the settings wise, so it's typically a post request as far as um, the API call is concerned to the webhook. Remember, the communication is happening over HTTP, and to send the data along with the webhook, you just use JSON or XML. So I'm just going to use JSON, and I have some dummy data here. And so that's pretty much it as far as triggering it concerns. You're not going to trigger it yourself in sort of real world scenarios. Some apps are going to be doing this behind the scenes, but this is just for demo, of course. So here I'm just going to, this is the button. This is going to trigger the workflow. And if you go back to make, look, it is sort of waiting for something to happen. And if I zoom in, what it says is make is now listening for the data to determine the data structure. So it is what it does at this stage is it waits for a sample request to come in so that it can understand what kind of data will come with it. So you always have to hit it once during this step for make to learn about the data that is going to come with your webhook. So, and that data is this data over here, this JSON object over here. So as soon as I hit the send button, I get a 200 OK status here. And let's go back to make. And now it says successfully determined. So that means it successfully received a notification as soon as I hit this button. So at this point, the subscription part is done. We are fully subscribed. This particular scenario is fully subscribed to that webhook. So we created a new webhook. We went to the system and subscribed. So this part all the way till here is done, right? So now it's up to us what we do with this in our workflow. So here, now we have a guarantee that anytime that event happens, anytime I hit that button, this workflow is going to get triggered. What you do here, of course, is up to you. You're going to get this data, whatever you want to do with this data. So for this example, I'm going to use Slack, and I'm going to trigger a Slack message. Come on, make. It's lagging a little bit. Seems like I'll have to scroll. Oh, there we go. Okay, so for the action, I'm going to use Slack, and I'm going to create a new message. So anytime this event happens, and this in this example, what's happening is I am mocking a sale. I'm mocking a sales in some kind of an e-commerce store that this purchase was just made by someone. So I'm getting notified every time this sale takes place. So here I'm going to basically configure my Slack to give me a message every time this new order comes in. So I'm going to select a public channel. I'm going to select NCO demo, which I prepared ahead of time. And then here I will say, and notice, because we sent a test event, it already knows the data that it can expect with the webhook. So this data structure is the same as what we have here: order, items, customer. Go here, order.
Can you make it a little bit bigger?
Yeah. So this data structure right
Awesome.
here is the same as what we have here: order, items, and customer. So same thing here: order, items, and customer. So so it already knows what kind of data it can expect. So here I'll say, and this is the message that will go into Slack: a new order just came in, and that I'll attach. You can attach any variables from it. So we'll just say product name. A new order came in for the item, and we'll say total amount of the order. Again, just pulling in data from here. There we go. And then we can, of course, nothing is complete without a celebrate emoji. So there we go. And so now my Slack is fully configured. Hit OK. And at this point, the scenario is still turned off. But just to recap, what's happening is we have a webhook that we configured. This will get triggered anytime a new sale takes place in this example, which I am going to trigger from this button. And then as soon as that happens, we are going to receive a Slack message in a Slack channel. But notice that this is still turned off. This is not ready yet. And that is by design, because typically you would like to make sure that you test your scenario before you turn it on and and open the floodgates. So give me a second to open my Slack.
Sure. People in the audience, how are we doing? How much are you learning from today? I'm loving it. So I was very focused. So
that's good to know.
Appreciate it. I actually just organized this event so that I could learn. It was a private lesson.
There you go. That's a good way. Okay, so yeah, so where were we? So I said that, yeah, so currently the scenario is still turned off, and because we still haven't really tested it. So the best way to test it is to click on run once. And once you hit run once, what's going to happen is it's going to start listening. It's going to start listening. Basically, it's just the waiting. Remember, like we have the waiting step. So at this point, we've asked it to, hey, heads up, keep waiting, something might happen. So then I go to, and this is the Slack channel, by the way, I was testing here last night. So this is where the message will come in. And then to actually create this event, I'll go back to Postman, and let's make the total $250. And then the product name, let's say orange hat. So this data will go with the webhook, and I'm going to hit send. So there we go. So it seems like it went through. We can see here, we can inspect that the order came in for $250. And then seems like the Slack message went through as well. And now let's go to Slack and see. So there we go. A new order just came in for the amount. So just like by hit of a button, I received a Slack message. So that hit of a button, of course, is just for the demo purposes. In the real life, it could be any events that are taking place in your apps of interest. So with that, we can, any questions here?
Yeah, let's see. I can see people, being very excited about it in the chat as well. Great session. This is good stuff. It's fun. Joe Toscano. Hi, Joe. who just joined us, says, it definitely validates a lot of the work I've been doing, but I'm also learning a few new things. So very happy to hear that, Joe. Petros says, super, must be super clear to beginners. We already know. Great. I'm glad you're finding it useful as well. And this is great even for people who do know about these things, because like Joe is saying, you're also learning new things. And if you do already know them, it's always interesting to see and hear the perspective of another from another essence. I'm not sure if we're opening up our Q&A yet, or if you do have
Yeah,
something else.
yeah, just to wrap up here. So at this point, basically everything is configured, and we just have to turn it on. And at this point, anytime I hit that button, that webhook is going to go through. We don't have to click on the run once button anymore. At this time, we are fully configured. So just to wrap up, go back to the slides. So we did the demo, we had the Q&A, and yeah, I guess we can just stop here for now.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Feel free to leave that screen if you want. It was really nice. It's just Q&A. If you want to leave it there. But thank you again, Sahil. I absolutely loved, your presentation, your pace. You're definitely a good instructor. And on that note, if everyone else here liked and enjoyed this session with Sahil, I could not recommend highly enough teaching style, and you've enjoyed this today. He is the founder at NoCode University, and you can see a lot more content in there. So please go ahead and check it out. And let's open up the floor to our Q&A with our community. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat if you have any come up right now. And as you do that, I'm going to pull in our form and start getting some questions from there. So let's get started. Jason Skinner says, how do you work with Zapier webhooks? He uses Zapier and Google Sheets, for example.
Yeah, so I mean the general concept is exactly the same. Obviously, the UI looks slightly different. How you configure looks slightly different, but the fundamental is exactly the same. I think as far as Zapier is concerned, webhooks are only available on certain paid tiers. They're not available on the free tier. In Make, that's what I like. It's available for all tiers. So, but yeah, the process is going to be exactly the same. You basically go to Zapier, create a new webhook URL, and then you sort of subscribe to it. To basically, you provide that URL to an app that you are interested in receiving notifications from. So yeah, not that much different. Just a different UI and steps to take.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you for that. Jared says, using Make, how would you update or change the label of an email that is just received using a webhook? No, using a mailhook. So.
Oh, so you want to change the label of the same email that you just got?
Using a mailhook.
Change the label of an email that is just received using a mailhook. Well, first of all, whichever email client or email provider you use has to expose that API. So, or has to have that integration built into Make, or well, in Make in this case. So with Gmail, okay, yeah. So Gmail is integrated with Make, but I'm not sure if they provide or expose a add label event. So I mean, so it comes down to identifying the email somehow with maybe there's some kind of an ID of the email, and then if the Gmail integration with Make supports updating a label. So it is a little bit restricted by what the APIs and the integrations allow. So I don't know on the top of my head. I'll have to look at what actions Gmail supports within Make.
Perfect.
But essentially, it's the event comes in. Yeah, just read that. But essentially, the event comes in, and then you have the event, and then action. It's either an API call or the built-in actions. So we'll have to see what that supports.
A question from Travis. What is the best way to determine how to connect to APIs?
I'm not exactly sure what you mean by two APIs. Like, I'll need more context. Connecting to where and for what? Is he online?
Have you ever connected? Have you ever connected to APIs? Is that possible? Can you? Because I know that. Well,
Oh,
yeah,
connect to APIs, not to APIs. Connect to APIs. Is that what he means? Not the number two.
I think he means like connect two APIs together.
Oh,
No, no.
so connecting to APIs, like again, I'll need more context. You're not really connecting to APIs. APIs are just used for information exchange. So if you, well, an example of connecting to APIs would be, say, we call the weather API to get the weather. So that's API number one. And then we call the email API to send the email based on what we get from the weather event. So that's like somehow we can say connecting to APIs, but I'm not exactly sure about the question here.
We're asking for more context. And let's see this one here from Catherine. Let's talk Airtable API connection updates and writing custom webhooks for platforms not yet integrated with Zapier or Make.
Yeah, so for the second part, you just saw today live how to integrate with platforms that are not yet integrated with Zapier or Make, as long as they are willing to expose the webhook events. You can use that. But also, yeah, so great question. And I actually faced this problem myself several times. There is sometimes an app that doesn't support webhooks that, hey, like, no, we don't have any way, like you can't subscribe to us. So what do you do then? Uh, so there is a backup, because no matter how old the app is, if it's on the internet, it hopefully provides one thing, and that is sending email notifications of different changes. So that email notification can act as the trigger for the workflow. So you can use Mailhooks in that case, just like we use webhooks, you can use Mailhooks. So the way you do that is you will go to your email provider and you will set up an auto forwarding from a particular email. So let's say, so I did this with Costco, right? When I buy a Costco gift card, I wanted to get notified. Costco doesn't have any API, but it does send me an email with the amount of the gift card. So I auto forward that email that I get from Costco to Make, and then that logs it into Airtable, and there's more context. But I use that email as the trigger.
Perfect.
So Mailhooks, Mailhooks are a good backup.
Thank you, Sahil. I saw a question from Leslie. There it is. In your example, Postman had an easy spot to drop the webhooks URL. What happens when a system does not have that?
Yeah, so that's what I mentioned. If a system does support webhooks, then it will be somewhere in the settings where it says that, hey, subscribe. Or sometimes if the system doesn't have that, what they have is you have to make an API call with the URL of the webhook. So they don't have an interface, but you have to send them a post notification to a particular, so it'll be in the API documentation, and this is pretty common. You make a post event to their API, which is basically to subscribe, and with that you send the URL. So you can use Postman for that or command line, but you send the webhook URL to subscribe. So basically, if they don't have an interface, you have to use Postman or command line. But if they don't support webhooks at all, then yeah, maybe try Mailhooks, or out of luck, try a different app.
What platform would you recommend to manage APIs?
Manage APIs? Not 100% sure what manage means in this context, but if it is to sort of have all the APIs organized and listed with all the information that they expect, Postman is the way to go, no doubt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even I can recommend Postman. Question from Alicia. Can you offer details or tips on how to parse data out of the email when using a mailhook?
Yeah, so this is a slightly tricky one, but I recently used actually both the parser in Zapier and parser in Make. So what happens is, remember in the example, we sent the webhook, and then the JSON data came in, and then Make was able to determine the data structure. So in Mailhooks, there's an extra step, and essentially you get the HTML of the email or the text of the email, and then you have to use an extra step, which is the mail parser. And there's an HTML parser and there's a text parser, both in Make. And then yeah, that requires some sort of tweaking and tinkering around. So it'll get a little bit involved just for a verbal explanation, but use HTML parser. And within HTML parser, there are certain options to identify exactly what you are trying to fetch. But once you trained it to do it once, and as long as the email doesn't change its structure, the HTML structure continues to be the same, it continues to work. But if the email provider or if the email sender change the HTML, then it will break, obviously, and then you'll have to reconfigure it. But yeah, look at the HTML parser within Make, and then there's a mail parser within Zapier. Yeah, Zapier formatter.
Sorry, my connection just went for a second. Okay, I'm back. Thank you. And Alicia, if you do have any more questions and that go a little bit beyond the verbal explanation, Sahil is an awesome member of our community in our Discord. So if you want to, you can come in and hang out with us on Discord and ask any other further question you might have. And I'm sure Sahil will be more than happy to help. He's been a fantastic supporter of our community and a great member there as well. So let's see, do we have anything else coming through? Petro says Zapier has formatter for this kind of work. Yep. Oh, we do have a question here from James. How do you handle errors or retries? How do you handle errors or retries with webhooks and mailhooks?
Yeah, so as I remember in Make, at least, if there's an issue with the workflow is turned off, and then it queues all your following requests coming into the webhook. So, and then Make always sends you a notification that, hey, like there was an error encountered, this workflow has been turned off. So you have to go, and when you re-enable it, it will ask you whether you want to process the queue again. So the idea there is that you first fix the error in the workflow. For example, say the data structure changed and it cannot find the key that you're looking for. So you go fix that first, and then when you enable the workflow again, it will process the queue that is waiting in the backlog. So that's one. And then within the workflow, obviously, there can be errors, there can be corner conditions, there can be cases where the data is missing. So it's always good to have the forgetting the name here, but within Make, there's always a scenario that it can go into the error condition. So if it doesn't go in the normal case, it goes in the error case, and then it can either notify you or something like that. So there are different ways depending on the context. But typically, if the workflow cannot even run, Make will turn it off, and then you have to manually identify. And then, of course, there's some tools now that you can use.
And of course, you can use Operator to monitor all your errors and issues you might have with automations. So thank you for that, Pedros. Spot on. 20 plus community points for you. Awesome, fantastic. Well, I don't see any other questions coming through for today's session. And I know that we've come up to the hour, so that's perfect timing, Sahil. It has been a fantastic, very short time, and I absolutely love your teaching style. And so once again, if you would like to share your about your NoCode University, feel free to do that. Maybe give us a little bit more insights on that. What else are you teaching in there?
Yeah, so pretty early days. I'm just actually launching a crash course today, which might be pretty beginner level for the audience here. But I have a course coming on Zapier-based automation, and then an advanced automation course on Make as well, where I will go into the details such as the ones we did today, webhook, mailhook, text parsing, and all that regular expression, you name it. So that one will be pretty detailed. So that's coming in next month. But anyone can join anytime so that they start getting the notifications as to when the courses go live. And then I'm also exploring a sort of an automation bootcamp that will be part of the NoCode University broad umbrella as well. So that will be more of workshops like this, hands-on, and sort of in person. But even if you go for just a regular, I'm always available to answer questions. So yeah, lots more to come. It's early days, but yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot more on APIs, automation, and so on and so forth.
Fantastic. Well, I guess people, there's a lot of resources and knowledge available for you out there. Obviously, if you want to see more of this, feel free to join our community. As I mentioned, with excellent hangouts every Tuesday. It's fun. So I highly encourage everyone to apply. And yeah, with that being said, I feel like we've covered pretty much anything. What do you think, Sahil?
Yeah, this was a good one. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. And thanks everyone for participating as well. That's the best part. But
Yeah,
yeah,
actually,
can't wait. Yeah.
We can give them some homework. If you did learn something about, something new from today's session, maybe share about it. Share one thing in a post that you've learned from today's workshop. That would be really cool. It's a new thing. I've never done it before. So if you're still watching and you enjoyed it, give us a shout out and tell us what you've learned.
Awesome. Well, thanks again.
All right. Well, I'll see you in the community then, Sahil.
All right. See you there.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.